The morning sun cast long shadows across Bagram Airfield as Colonel Sarah Mitchell stepped out of the command center, her boots crunching against the dusty ground. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on her shoulders as she surveyed the bustling activity around the base. Aircraft of various types lined the tarmac, from sleek fighters to massive cargo planes, each representing the complex machinery of modern warfare that she now commanded. At 42, Colonel Mitchell had earned her position through years of dedication, sacrifice, and an unwavering commitment to excellence. Her journey to this moment had been anything but conventional. Born in a small farming town in Iowa, she had grown up watching crop dusters dance across endless fields of corn, never imagining that those early glimpses of aviation would shape her entire life. Her father, a Vietnam veteran who rarely spoke of his service, had instilled in her a sense of duty that ran deeper than words could express. The path to becoming a colonel in the United States Air Force had required her to break through barriers that many believed were insurmountable. When she first enlisted 24 years ago, women in combat roles were still fighting for recognition and respect. She had endured skeptical glances, whispered doubts, and the constant pressure to prove herself worthy of wearing the uniform. Each promotion had been hard-earned, each command assignment a test of her resolve and capability. Her current assignment at Bagram represented the culmination of her career. As the commanding officer of the 455th Air Expeditionary Wing, she oversaw operations that directly impacted the safety of troops on the ground and the success of missions across Afghanistan. The responsibility was immense, and she carried it with the same quiet dignity that had defined her throughout her service. The radio crackled to life on her belt, interrupting her thoughts. The voice of her operations officer, Major James Rodriguez, came through with urgent precision. Intelligence reports indicated a critical situation developing in a remote valley approximately 60 miles southeast of their position. A small forward operating base had come under heavy attack, and ground forces were requesting immediate close air support to prevent being overrun. Colonel Mitchell quickly made her way back to the operations center, where a flurry of activity greeted her arrival. Charts and maps covered every available surface, while multiple screens displayed real-time intelligence feeds and communication channels. The tension in the room was palpable as her staff worked to coordinate the response to the developing crisis. Major Rodriguez briefed her on the situation with the efficiency that came from years of experience. The forward operating base, designated Firebase Charlie, housed approximately 200 personnel, including both American forces and Afghan allies. The attacking force was estimated to be significantly larger and well-armed, with reports of heavy weapons and coordinated tactics that suggested a planned assault rather than an opportunistic strike. The geography of the target area presented additional challenges. The firebase was situated in a narrow valley surrounded by steep terrain, with limited approach routes and even fewer escape options. Weather conditions were deteriorating, with low clouds and gusty winds that would complicate any air support mission. Time was critical, as the attackers appeared to be gaining ground despite the defensive efforts of the base personnel. As Colonel Mitchell absorbed the details of the situation, her mind automatically began processing the available options. The 455th had multiple aircraft types at its disposal, each with specific capabilities and limitations. Fighter jets could provide rapid response, but had limited loiter time over the target area. Helicopter gunships offered precision and flexibility, but were vulnerable to ground fire. Cargo aircraft could deliver supplies, but lacked the firepower needed for close combat support. The decision she was about to make would directly impact the lives of the men and women fighting for their survival at Firebase Charlie. Every minute of delay potentially meant casualties among friendly forces, but a rushed or inappropriate response could prove equally devastating. The weight of command had never felt heavier than it did in that moment. Her communications officer, Staff Sergeant Lisa Chun, approached with updates from Firebase Charlie. The situation was deteriorating rapidly, with enemy forces having breached the outer perimeter in 2 locations. Casualty reports were beginning to come in, and the base commander was requesting immediate assistance. The urgency in his voice was unmistakable, even filtered through the static and interference of long-distance radio communication. Colonel Mitchell gathered her senior staff around the central planning table. The faces looking back at her reflected the same sense of urgency and determination that she felt. These were seasoned professionals who had served in combat zones around the world, and each understood the gravity of the situation they faced. The discussion that followed was brief but comprehensive, covering available assets, response times, and potential complications. The options were laid out clearly. Several F-16 Fighting Falcons were on standby, armed and ready for immediate deployment. Their speed would allow them to reach the target area quickly, but their limited ammunition capacity and high fuel consumption would restrict their effectiveness in a prolonged engagement. A pair of Apache helicopters was also available, offering greater precision and longer engagement time, but they would take significantly longer to reach the target and would be more vulnerable to enemy fire. As the debate continued, Colonel Mitchell found herself thinking about the young men and women at Firebase Charlie. Many of them were barely out of their teens, far from home and family, depending on her leadership to bring them safely through this crisis. The abstract concepts of strategy and tactics suddenly became very personal when viewed through the lens of individual lives hanging in the balance. The meteorology officer provided an updated weather report that further complicated their options. Cloud cover was increasing, and visibility was decreasing across the target area. Wind speeds were gusting up to 30 knots, creating challenging conditions for any aircraft attempting to provide close support. The weather window was closing rapidly, adding another layer of urgency to an already critical situation. Colonel Mitchell made her decision with the calm authority that had defined her leadership style throughout her career. She turned to her operations officer and issued the order that would set events in motion. Any available aircraft should be prepared for immediate deployment to Firebase Charlie. The priority was getting effective close air support to the embattled base as quickly as possible, regardless of the specific aircraft type involved. The operations center exploded into controlled activity as her staff began implementing the order. Radio calls went out to various squadron commanders, requesting immediate readiness reports and estimated response times. Maintenance crews scrambled to ensure that all available aircraft were fully operational and properly armed for the mission ahead. As the preparations unfolded around her, Colonel Mitchell remained focused on the bigger picture. The success or failure of this operation would be measured not just in tactical objectives achieved, but in lives saved and personnel safely returned to their families. The burden of command had never felt more personal or more profound than it did in those crucial moments. The first response came from the fighter squadron, reporting 2 F-16s ready for immediate launch. Their pilots were already conducting final pre-flight checks, and they estimated a departure time of less than 10 minutes. The Apache helicopters would require additional preparation time, but could be airborne within 25 minutes if needed. Colonel Mitchell acknowledged the reports while continuing to monitor the situation at Firebase Charlie. The radio communications painted an increasingly dire picture, with enemy forces continuing their advance despite the defensive efforts of the base personnel. Artillery and mortar fire were taking their toll on both the defenders and the base infrastructure itself. Her decision to mobilize any available aircraft reflected both the urgency of the situation and her confidence in the capabilities of her aircrews. Throughout her career, she had worked with pilots and aircrew members who exemplified the highest standards of professionalism and skill. She trusted their ability to adapt to whatever aircraft they were assigned and to deliver the support that Firebase Charlie desperately needed. The sound of jet engines spooling up could be heard even inside the operations center, confirming that her orders were being carried out with the efficiency she expected. Within minutes, the first aircraft would be airborne and heading toward the embattled Firebase. The race against time had begun, and the outcome would depend on the skill, courage, and determination of everyone involved in the mission. Captain Maria Vasquez had been preparing for routine training exercises when the alert came through the squadron communications system. The urgency in the voice of the duty officer immediately captured her attention, and within seconds, she was sprinting toward her assigned aircraft. At 29, she had accumulated over 800 flight hours in various aircraft types, but her specialty and passion lay with the A-10 Thunderbolt II, affectionately known as the Warthog. The A-10 was not the prettiest aircraft in the Air Force inventory, nor was it the fastest or most technologically advanced. What it lacked in glamour, however, it more than compensated for in raw effectiveness and survivability. Built around the massive Gu-8 Avenger cannon, the aircraft was designed specifically for close air support missions, capable of delivering devastating firepower with surgical precision while withstanding significant battle damage. Captain Vasquez had developed an almost personal relationship with her aircraft over the past 18 months of deployment. Every rivet, every control surface, every system had become familiar through countless hours of flight time and meticulous pre-flight inspections. She knew exactly how the aircraft would respond to her inputs under any conceivable flight condition, and that intimate knowledge had saved lives on more than one occasion. As she approached her A-10, the ground crew was already completing the final preparations for immediate launch. Master Sergeant Tony Williams, her dedicated crew chief, met her at the aircraft with a thumbs-up gesture that conveyed both readiness and confidence. The relationship between pilot and crew chief was sacred in military aviation, built on mutual respect and absolute trust. Sergeant Williams had been maintaining combat aircraft for over 15 years, and his expertise ensured that Captain Vasquez never had to question the mechanical reliability of her machine. The pre-flight inspection was conducted with practiced efficiency, but without sacrificing thoroughness. Captain Vasquez examined every external component, checking for any signs of damage or malfunction that could compromise the mission. The A-10's robust construction was evident in its thick armor plating and redundant systems, designed to bring pilots home even after sustaining significant battle damage. Loading into the cockpit, she immediately began the engine start sequence while simultaneously reviewing the mission briefing that had been transmitted to her aircraft systems. The situation at Firebase Charlie was deteriorating rapidly, with enemy forces having achieved multiple breaches of the defensive perimeter. Ground forces were requesting immediate close air support, specifically requesting aircraft capable of engaging targets in close proximity to friendly positions. The twin General Electric TF-34 engines came to life with their characteristic whine, filling the cockpit with the familiar sounds and vibrations that signaled readiness for combat. Captain Vasquez conducted the required systems checks with methodical precision, ensuring that all weapons systems, navigation equipment, and communications gear were functioning properly. The A-10's reputation for reliability was well earned, but combat operations left no room for assumption or oversight. As she prepared for takeoff, Captain Vasquez reflected on the unique capabilities that made the A-10 ideally suited for this type of mission. Unlike faster fighter jets that required multiple high-speed passes to deliver their ordnance, the A-10 could loiter over the battlefield for extended periods, providing continuous support to ground forces. Its slow flight characteristics and excellent maneuverability allowed for precise targeting even in complex terrain, while its heavily armored cockpit provided protection against ground fire that would prove fatal to other aircraft types. The radio crackled with clearance for immediate takeoff, bypassing the normal traffic pattern procedures due to the emergency nature of the mission. Captain Vasquez acknowledged the clearance and advanced the throttles, feeling the familiar surge of acceleration as the aircraft responded to her inputs. The A-10 was not built for speed, but its purposeful, deliberate acceleration reflected its no-nonsense approach to combat aviation. Lifting off from Bagram Airfield, she immediately contacted the Airborne Command and Control aircraft that was coordinating the response to the Firebase Charlie situation. The picture that emerged from the radio communications was sobering. Enemy forces had surrounded the firebase on 3 sides, with only one narrow escape route remaining open. Casualties were mounting among the defenders, and ammunition supplies were running dangerously low. The flight to Firebase Charlie would take approximately 25 minutes at the A-10's cruising speed, during which time Captain Vasquez used every available moment to study the terrain and plan her attack profile. The digital maps displayed on her multifunction displays showed the challenging geography of the target area, with steep ridgelines and narrow valleys that would require careful navigation to avoid flying into enemy crossfires. Weather conditions added another layer of complexity to the mission. Cloud cover was variable, with some areas completely obscured while others remained relatively clear. Wind speeds were gusting inconsistently, requiring constant adjustments to maintain accurate weapon delivery. The combination of terrain and weather would test every aspect of her flying skills and tactical knowledge. As she approached the target area, Captain Vasquez established contact with the forward air controller at Firebase Charlie. The voice that came through her headset belonged to Staff Sergeant Mike Torres, a combat-experienced controller who had been coordinating air support missions for over 3 years. His calm professionalism provided a stark contrast to the chaos of battle evident in the background noise, including explosions and automatic weapons fire. Sergeant Torres provided a detailed briefing on the tactical situation, including the locations of friendly forces, known enemy positions, and priority targets for engagement. The enemy had established machine gun positions on the ridgelines overlooking the firebase, providing them with commanding fields of fire that were preventing effective movement by the defending forces. Several mortar positions had also been identified, and these were causing significant casualties among the defenders. The rules of engagement for this mission were clearly defined, emphasizing the protection of friendly forces while maximizing the destruction of enemy capabilities. Captain Vasquez would need to deliver her ordnance with extreme precision, as even small targeting errors could result in friendly casualties in such close proximity to defended positions. The margin for error was essentially zero, placing enormous responsibility on her shoulders. Her first pass over the battlefield revealed the full scope of the tactical situation confronting the defenders of Firebase Charlie. The enemy forces were well-positioned and appeared to be equipped with modern weapons and equipment. Their coordinated attack suggested significant planning and preparation, indicating that this was not an opportunistic assault, but rather a deliberate operation designed to overrun the base. The defending forces had established defensive positions using whatever cover was available, including damaged buildings, earthen barriers, and disabled vehicles. Their return fire was sporadic but determined, suggesting that ammunition conservation was becoming a critical factor in their ability to continue resistance. The American and Afghan flags still flew over the Central Command post, but the fabric was torn and blackened by smoke from nearby explosions. Captain Vasquez identified her first target, a heavy machine gun position that was preventing movement in the eastern sector of the firebase. The enemy gunners had positioned themselves behind a rocky outcropping that provided excellent protection from direct fire but left them vulnerable to attack from above. She rolled into her attack profile, diving toward the target while making the precise calculations necessary for accurate weapon delivery. The A-10 cannon erupted to life with its distinctive sound, firing depleted uranium rounds at a rate of over 3,000 rounds per minute. The effect on the target was immediate and devastating, with the rocky position disintegrating under the impact of the heavy projectiles. Secondary explosions confirmed the destruction of enemy ammunition supplies, eliminating the threat to friendly forces in that sector. Radio calls from Sergeant Torres confirmed the successful engagement and provided targeting information for additional threats. Captain Vasquez adjusted her flight path to line up for another attack pass, this time targeting a mortar position that had been causing significant casualties among the defenders. The enemy crew had attempted to conceal their position using camouflage and natural terrain features, but their continued firing had revealed their location to the experienced forward air controller. Her second attack run was equally precise, with the A-10's cannon fire walking across the target area and eliminating the mortar crew along with their equipment. The immediate cessation of incoming mortar fire provided tangible relief to the beleaguered defenders, allowing them to reposition and strengthen their defensive lines. As she climbed away from the target area to assess the overall situation, Captain Vasquez could see that her attacks had already begun to shift the tactical balance in favor of the defending forces. Enemy movement had become more cautious and less coordinated, suggesting that their command structure was beginning to break down under the pressure of effective air support. The psychological impact of close air support often proved as valuable as the physical destruction of enemy equipment and personnel. Back at Bagram Airfield, Colonel Mitchell stood frozen in the operations center as the radio transmission crackled through the speakers. The voice of Captain Vasquez, calm, and professional despite the intensity of combat, reported her successful engagement of multiple enemy positions at Firebase Charlie. But it was the aircraft identification that had caused the colonel to momentarily halt all movement, her coffee cup suspended halfway to her lips. Her order had been simple and direct, any jet would do. In her mind, she had envisioned one of the sleek F-16 Fighting Falcons that formed the backbone of her fighter squadrons. These aircraft represented the modern face of air power, with their advanced avionics, precision-guided munitions, and ability to engage multiple target types with devastating effectiveness. The F-16 was what most people pictured when they thought of military jets in action. Instead, the first aircraft to respond to her urgent call had been an A-10 Thunderbolt II, a machine that many considered outdated and unglamorous compared to its supersonic counterparts. The A-10 had been designed during the Cold War specifically for one mission: destroying Soviet tanks in a hypothetical conflict in Central Europe. Its slow speed, limited range, and seemingly primitive appearance had made it the target of budget cuts and modernization efforts for decades. As Captain Vasquez continued her attack runs over Firebase Charlie, Colonel Mitchell found herself remembering the countless debates she had witnessed regarding the future of the A-10 program. Military strategists and defense analysts had argued that modern warfare required speed and stealth capabilities that the aging Warthog simply could not provide. They pointed to newer aircraft with multi-role capabilities and advanced technology as the way forward for air power doctrine. The irony of the situation was not lost on her. Her emergency call for immediate air support had been answered by the very aircraft that critics claimed was no longer relevant to modern combat operations. Yet the radio reports filtering back from the battlefield told a different story entirely. Captain Vasquez was systematically dismantling enemy positions with a precision and effectiveness that would have been difficult to achieve with any other aircraft in the Air Force inventory. Major Rodriguez approached with updated intelligence reports from Firebase Charlie. The tactical situation had improved dramatically in the past 30 minutes, with enemy forces beginning to withdraw from their forward positions. The combination of determined ground defense and devastating close air support had broken the momentum of the attack, forcing the enemy to reassess their operational plans. Colonel Mitchell listened to the reports while studying the real-time feed from the battle area. The A-10's gun camera footage showed the methodical destruction of enemy positions, each engagement conducted with surgical precision despite the challenging terrain and weather conditions. The aircraft's ability to loiter over the battlefield for extended periods allowed Captain Vasquez to carefully evaluate each target before engaging, minimizing the risk of friendly casualties while maximizing the destruction of enemy capabilities. The colonel's appreciation for the A-10's capabilities had been shaped by years of combat experience, but seeing the aircraft in action during this critical mission reinforced her understanding of its unique value. While newer aircraft might capture headlines and defense budgets, the Warthog's specialized design made it irreplaceable for certain types of missions. Its thick armor plating, redundant systems, and powerful cannon were specifically engineered for the close air support role that was proving so crucial at Firebase Charlie. Staff Sergeant Chun provided an update on the status of other aircraft that had been prepared for the mission. 2 F-16s remained on standby, fueled and armed for immediate deployment if additional support was required. The Apache helicopters had completed their preparations and were ready for launch, but the effectiveness of Captain Vasquez's attack runs had reduced the immediate urgency for additional air assets. As she monitored the ongoing situation, Colonel Mitchell reflected on the broader implications of what she was witnessing. The military had spent billions of dollars developing advanced fighter aircraft with sophisticated technology and multi-role capabilities. Yet when American lives hung in the balance at Firebase Charlie, it was the unglamorous, supposedly outdated A-10 that had responded first and was proving most effective in neutralizing the threat. The forward air controller's reports painted a picture of systematic battlefield dominance. Captain Vasquez had identified and engaged 12 separate enemy positions, including heavy weapons emplacements, mortar crews, and sniper positions that had been pinning down the defending forces. Each attack had been conducted with textbook precision, demonstrating the effectiveness of both the aircraft and the pilot operating it. Colonel Mitchell had flown combat missions early in her career, and she understood the challenges that Captain Vasquez was facing over Firebase Charlie. Flying at low altitude in hostile territory required exceptional skill and courage, particularly when conducting multiple attack runs against determined opposition. The A-10's design provided significant protection against ground fire, but no aircraft was invulnerable to enemy weapons, and each pass over the target area carried inherent risks. The weather conditions added another layer of complexity to the mission. Cloud cover was continuing to fluctuate, creating visibility challenges that required constant adaptation by the pilot. Wind patterns in the mountainous terrain were unpredictable, affecting weapon delivery accuracy and flight stability. Despite these challenges, Captain Vasquez continued to demonstrate the adaptability and skill that exemplified the best traditions of military aviation. Radio communications with Firebase Charlie confirmed the dramatic improvement in the tactical situation. The base commander reported that enemy pressure had decreased significantly, allowing his forces to reinforce their defensive positions and tend to wounded personnel. Medical evacuation procedures were being initiated for the most serious casualties, taking advantage of the improved security situation created by the air support mission. Colonel Mitchell found herself thinking about the young airmen and soldiers at Firebase Charlie who would return home safely because of Captain Vasquez's actions. Military operations often focused on strategic objectives and tactical success, but the human element remained paramount. Every enemy position destroyed represented lives saved among the defending forces, families that would remain intact, and futures that would not be cut short by combat. The colonel's decision to deploy any available aircraft, rather than waiting for specific aircraft types, had proved fortuitous in ways she had not anticipated. The A-10's immediate availability and specialized capabilities had created a perfect match for the mission requirements at Firebase Charlie. Sometimes the best solution was not the most obvious or technologically advanced option, but rather the one that perfectly suited the specific circumstances of the situation. As Captain Vasquez prepared for what appeared to be her final attack run, Colonel Mitchell considered the broader lessons of this engagement. Military planning and procurement decisions often emphasize theoretical capabilities and future threats, but real-world effectiveness ultimately depended on the ability to respond to actual situations with appropriate assets. The A-10's performance over Firebase Charlie demonstrated that specialized capabilities retained their value even in an era of multi-role aircraft and advanced technology. The communications officer reported that additional A-10s from other squadrons were being prepared for deployment, creating a continuous air support capability that would ensure the security of Firebase Charlie throughout the day. The success of the initial response had validated the decision to maintain the A-10 fleet despite ongoing debates about its future role in military operations. Colonel Mitchell watched the tactical displays showing the gradual withdrawal of enemy forces from the area around Firebase Charlie. What had begun as a coordinated assault on a vulnerable position had been transformed into a disorganized retreat through the devastating effectiveness of close air support. The enemy's operational plan had been completely disrupted, forcing them to abandon their objectives and seek cover from continued air attacks. The radio crackled with Captain Vasquez's voice reporting the successful completion of her mission. Enemy forces were in full retreat, and no immediate threats remained to the security of Firebase Charlie. Her aircraft had expended most of its ammunition during the extended engagement, but had suffered no battle damage despite multiple passes through hostile territory. The A-10's legendary survivability had once again been demonstrated under actual combat conditions. As the immediate crisis at Firebase Charlie moved toward resolution, Colonel Mitchell began considering the after-action reports and lessons learned that would emerge from this engagement. The rapid response and overwhelming effectiveness of close air support would undoubtedly influence future tactical planning and resource allocation decisions. More importantly, the successful defense of Firebase Charlie would serve as a testament to the skill and dedication of the men and women who served under her command. 3 hours later, Captain Vasquez guided her battle-tested A-10 through the traffic pattern at Bagram Airfield, the distinctive sound of its twin engines announcing her return to anyone within miles of the base. The aircraft showed signs of its recent combat engagement, with scorch marks on the wings from muzzle blast and small dents in the fuselage from debris kicked up by her own cannon fire. Yet it had brought her home safely, just as the rugged machine had done for countless other pilots throughout its decades of service. As she taxied toward the parking area, Captain Vasquez could see Master Sergeant Williams and his ground crew waiting with their usual mixture of professional concern and quiet pride. The post-flight inspection would reveal the full extent of any battle damage, but the aircraft's performance during the mission had been flawless. Every system had functioned exactly as designed, providing her with the capability to decisively influence the outcome of the engagement at Firebase Charlie. Colonel Mitchell was among the small group of personnel waiting on the flight line as Captain Vasquez shut down the engines and completed her post-flight procedures. The colonel's presence was unusual but not unwelcome, reflecting the significance of the mission that had just been completed. As the pilot climbed down from the cockpit, she was greeted with handshakes and congratulations from fellow airmen who understood the importance of what had been accomplished. The debriefing session that followed provided Colonel Mitchell with a detailed account of the engagement from the pilot's perspective. Captain Vasquez described each attack run with the precision and objectivity that characterized professional military aviation, but her words could not fully convey the skill and courage that had been required to achieve such decisive results under challenging conditions. The gun camera footage reviewed during the debriefing told its own story of surgical precision and devastating effectiveness. Each engagement had been conducted with careful attention to minimizing collateral damage while maximizing the destruction of enemy capabilities. The A-10's ability to deliver sustained firepower with exceptional accuracy had proved decisive in breaking the enemy's assault on Firebase Charlie. Reports from the forward air controller and the base commander at Firebase Charlie provided confirmation of the mission's success from the ground perspective. Staff Sergeant Torres, the controller who had guided Captain Vasquez's attacks, described the immediate and dramatic impact of the air support on the tactical situation. Enemy forces that had been advancing with apparent confidence had quickly lost their cohesion under the devastating fire from above. The base commander's report painted a vivid picture of how close Firebase Charlie had come to being overrun before the arrival of air support. Enemy forces had achieved multiple breaches of the defensive perimeter and were preparing for a final assault when Captain Vasquez arrived overhead. The timely intervention had not only saved the base but had prevented what could have been a significant tactical defeat with serious strategic implications. Colonel Mitchell found herself reflecting on the chain of events that had led to this successful outcome. Her decision to call for any available aircraft, rather than specifying particular aircraft types, had been made in the urgency of the moment without full consideration of which specific aircraft might respond first. The fact that an A-10 had been the first to launch had been more a matter of readiness and pilot availability than deliberate tactical planning. Yet the outcome could not have been better if she had specifically requested the A-10 for the mission. The aircraft's specialized capabilities had proved perfectly suited to the requirements of the situation at Firebase Charlie. Its ability to operate at low altitude in hostile territory, deliver precise firepower in close proximity to friendly forces, and remain over the battlefield for extended periods had been exactly what was needed to turn the tide of battle. The success of the mission prompted Colonel Mitchell to reconsider her own assumptions about modern air power and the role of specialized aircraft in contemporary military operations. The A-10 had been designed for a specific mission during a different era, yet its performance over Firebase Charlie demonstrated that those specialized capabilities remained highly relevant to current operational requirements. In the days that followed, word of the successful defense of Firebase Charlie spread throughout the coalition forces operating in Afghanistan. The story of how a single A-10 had arrived just in time to break a determined enemy assault became part of the informal legend that sustained morale among troops operating in isolated and vulnerable positions. Captain Vasquez found herself receiving recognition from senior commanders who understood the significance of her actions. The after-action reports and formal documentation of the engagement would eventually make their way through military channels to senior planners and strategists responsible for aircraft acquisition and deployment decisions. The effectiveness demonstrated by the A-10 during this mission would contribute to ongoing debates about the value of specialized versus multi-role aircraft in future military operations. For Colonel Mitchell, the experience reinforced important lessons about leadership and decision-making under pressure. Her willingness to deploy any available aircraft, rather than waiting for what might have seemed like the optimal solution, had proved crucial to the mission's success. Sometimes the best choice was simply the fastest choice, particularly when lives hung in the balance. The broader implications of the Firebase Charlie engagement extended beyond individual heroism or aircraft capabilities. The successful defense demonstrated the importance of maintaining diverse air assets capable of responding to different types of threats and operational requirements. No single aircraft type could address every possible scenario, but having the right aircraft available at the right moment could make the difference between success and disaster. Master Sergeant Williams and his maintenance crew completed their inspection of Captain Vasquez's A-10, finding only minor damage that could be repaired quickly using available parts and resources. The aircraft would be ready for another mission within hours if required, testament to both its rugged design and the skill of the maintenance personnel who kept it operational. The rapid turnaround capability was itself a crucial factor in the A-10's effectiveness as a close air support platform. Captain Vasquez returned to her regular duties with characteristic modesty, downplaying her individual contribution while emphasizing the teamwork that had made the mission successful. Her attitude reflected the professional culture of military aviation, where individual recognition was always secondary to mission accomplishment and the safety of fellow service members. The men and women at Firebase Charlie resumed their operations with renewed confidence, knowing that effective air support was available when needed. The psychological impact of the successful defense extended far beyond the immediate tactical situation, reinforcing the morale and determination of forces operating throughout the region. The knowledge that help could arrive quickly when needed was itself a form of force protection. Colonel Mitchell incorporated the lessons of the Firebase Charlie engagement into her ongoing operational planning and resource allocation decisions. The experience had demonstrated the continued relevance of specialized aircraft capabilities in an era increasingly dominated by multi-role platforms and advanced technology. While newer systems had their place in modern military operations, proven capabilities like those demonstrated by the A-10 retained significant value. The engagement at Firebase Charlie became a case study in the importance of maintaining diverse air assets and the value of rapid response capability in critical situations. Military planners and strategists would continue to debate the optimal mix of aircraft types and capabilities, but the successful defense of Firebase Charlie provided clear evidence that specialized platforms retained important roles in contemporary military operations. Years later, both Colonel Mitchell and Captain Vasquez would look back on the Firebase Charlie mission as a defining moment in their careers. For the colonel, it reinforced the importance of trusting in the capabilities of her personnel and equipment while making decisions quickly when circumstances demanded immediate action. For the captain, it validated years of training and preparation while demonstrating the continuing relevance of her chosen aircraft and mission specialization. The A-10 Thunderbolt II would continue flying combat missions for years to come, its unglamorous but devastatingly effective presence providing reassurance to ground forces operating in hostile territory. The aircraft that many had written off as obsolete had once again proven its worth when it mattered most, arriving first when the colonel had called for any jet that would do.